Snow hammered the Montana Valley that night, turning the world white and hollow as a church with no choir. Eli Mercer was used to storms, used to silence, used to a house that echoed with nothing but the wind. But when he stepped into his barn with a lantern raised high, he wasn't ready for what he found. A woman, bleeding, half frozen, and 7 terrified children pressed behind her like chicks behind a wounded hen. She didn't beg, didn't speak, just stared at him with eyes that had seen too many nights running and not enough mornings safe. Her arm was torn open, blood dripping onto the hay. One little boy burned with fever. Another hid his face, shaking. The oldest girl stood between them all, trying to be brave, trying to be grown, trying to be something no child should ever have to be. Eli should have turned them in, should have called the law, should have protected himself. But the storm outside wasn't half as fierce as the storm inside that barn. And when a woman whispered, "Please, don't send us away," Eli made a choice that would change every life under his roof and shake the whole territory awake. Snow hammered the barn roof like fists from frozen sky. Eli Mercer pushed the door open with his shoulder, rifle raised, breath turning to steam in the cold Montana air. He expected a thief, maybe a drifter, maybe a wolf that slipped past the fence line. What he found instead stopped him cold. A woman, bleeding, barefoot, her dress torn to ribbons, stood pressed against the far wall. 7 shivering children clung to her skirts. The smallest boy lay in her lap, lips blue, a faint whimper the only sign he was alive. Her eyes met Eli's, not the eyes of a criminal, the eyes of someone who'd been running too long. Wind howled outside. The lantern shook in Eli's hand, and for one awful moment, he heard his late wife's voice whisper the last thing she ever said. "Promise me, don't let this place die empty." Eli lowered the rifle, but as he stepped closer, the woman flinched hard, like a trapped animal expecting the next blow. What kind of terror drove a mother into a stranger's barn in the dead of winter? And what would Eli Mercer do about it now? The lantern light wavered as Eli knelt, slow and steady. He kept his hands low, palms open. "I ain't here to harm you." The woman didn't answer. She just tightened her arm around the smallest child, a toddler no older than 3, though the movement sent agony shooting through her. Blood soaked through a crude bandage on her upper arm, dripping down to her wrist. Eli set the rifle against the nearest post. The woman's voice cracked. "Don't call the law." Eli studied her. She was young, but worn past her years. Raven hair tangled with sweat and ice. Cheeks hollowed by hunger. Dress so thin he could see her ribs through the torn fabric. 7 children, all trembling, all staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. The eldest girl stepped forward, tall for her age, fierce, protective. "She carried my brother 9 miles, the girl said, chin lifting even though her hand shook. "Carried him the whole way while the rest of us walked." Eli swallowed hard. "Can you walk now?" he asked the woman. She didn't answer. The eldest girl did. "She ain't carried nothing since we got here." Eli nodded once and rose. "My house is 50 yards away. Fire's burning. Blankets. Food. You come with me." The woman's breath shuddered. "We can't pay. Didn't ask you to." They followed him through the snow, 8 shadows in the weak lantern light. By the time Eli reached the porch, the smallest boy's head had fallen against the woman's shoulder, limp as wet cloth. Inside, he threw more wood on the fire, flames leaping high. He pulled every blanket he owned from the chest his wife had painted yellow and spread them in a circle near the hearth. "Sit," he said. The woman sank down slow, like her bones might splinter. The children collapsed around her, huddling into the blankets like stones dropped in one place after too many miles. Eli brought bread, water, and the last of yesterday's stew. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in days. The eldest girl took 3 bites, then pushed the bowl to the boy beside her. Eli quietly grabbed another bowl. When the woman tried to lift her spoon, her hand wouldn't close. The spoon clattered to the floor. Eli knelt beside her again. "Let me see that arm." "It's fine. You're bleeding through your sleeve." Her jaw tightened. "It don't matter." "It matters to me." Something in his voice made her look at him. really look. Her eyes were green, a deep, early spring green that hurt to see because it reminded him of the last time his wife smiled under the cottonwoods. Why? The woman whispered. Eli sat back on his heels. Because it's November in Montana, and you got 7 kids half froze. Ain't a better reason than that. Her last bit of fight slipped. She let him cut the sleeve away. The wound made Eli's stomach clench. Deep, ragged, swollen hot with infection. She'd wrapped it with strips torn from her own petticoat, but the cloth was stiff with dried blood. Fence wire did this? Eli asked. She nodded once. Running from someone? A long pause. Always. He cleaned the wound with whiskey. She didn't scream, didn't even whimper, but her breathing went shallow and her free hand gripped the chair so hard her knuckles turned white. The eldest girl moved closer. I can hold her. Eli shook his head. She's stronger than both of us. She'll hold herself. 17 stitches later, he wrapped her arm with clean cloth. Finally, he asked, got a name? Rachel. She gestured weakly to the children. Some are mine. Some I picked up along the way. Seemed wrong to leave him. Eli stared. They collected me, Rachel whispered. Word gets around. Woman traveling alone who don't hit kids, they follow. Eli poured her a cup of chamomile tea with honey. Rachel stared at it like she barely remembered what warmth felt like. Where you headed? West. As far as the mountains led us. Running from what? My husband's brother. Eli stiffened. Rachel didn't notice. After my husband died, she murmured, his brother decided I was his property. When I refused, he put a price on my head. Eli's jaw clenched. 50 yards outside, wind hammered the shutters. Inside, a sick child whimpered. The fire cracked. Rachel winced. Eli stood. You and these young uns stay here. Till that arm heals and the boy's fever breaks. Rachel looked up sharply. You don't even know me. I know enough. And he meant it. Morning crept into the house quiet and pale, the kind of Montana dawn that didn't warm anything, just announced another day you had to survive. Eli Mercer rose the old way, before his eyes even opened, before thought caught up. Habit from years of feeding cattle and chasing winter storms before they buried the ranch whole. But this morning, something felt different. The house wasn't silent. Soft breathing, tiny snores, the rustle of blankets near the hearth, a low cough from the fevered boy. Life. Real, living life. He moved careful, stepping over small bodies curled like kittens on the floor. The fire had burned down to embers, so he rebuilt it, stacking wood slow to keep from waking anyone. Rachel was awake anyway. She sat propped against the wall, her bandaged arm held protectively against her chest, eyes half open but watchful. She looked exhausted, fragile, half frozen, but alive. You slept? Eli asked. Rachel's lips twitched. Some. Good. Kids. Ate last night. Warm now. Better than we've been in weeks. Her voice was rough, gravelly, tired beyond measure. Eli poured hot water from the kettle into a tin cup. Drink. Rachel obeyed this time. When the children finally stirred, it happened in a wave. First a yawn from the oldest boy, then a sneeze from one of the thin twins, then a soft whimper from the fevered little one. Eli knelt beside him. Color had returned to the child's cheeks, still pale, still sick, but not on death's door. Eli brushed back the boy's hair. He's got a fighting chance. Rachel's breath hitched so softly he almost missed it. By mid-morning, the house found a rhythm. The oldest girl, Grace, took charge of the little ones the way a commander takes charge of soldiers. She tied shawls around them, wiped noses, and arranged their blankets. Eli handed her a biscuit. Breakfast. She stared at it, suspicious. Why you helping us? Because you need help. That ain't how the world works. Eli leaned against the stove. Should be. Grace hesitated, then took the biscuit and split it in half, passing the bigger piece to her little brother James. Eli pretended not to notice the gesture. The youngest boy, the fevered toddler, woke with a thin cry. Rachel tried to stand, but her good arm shook too hard. Eli scooped the child up instead. The tiny boy clung to Eli's shirt and laid his fevered cheek against his shoulder. Eli held him steady, gentle. He's light as a fence post. Eli muttered. Rachel tried to smile. He ain't eaten proper in days. He paced the room with the child, humming low without thinking, an old tune his wife used to hum when the nights felt too long. Rachel watched him. Something softened in her face, something small and scared that didn't know how to trust yet, but wanted to. They had barely settled when a shadow crossed the porch window. Rachel stiffened. Grace froze. Eli saw it first. A tall silhouette riding a gray mare, spine straight as a fence post, coat stiff with frost. Miss Ida Harwood, the town's sharpest eyes and sharpest tongue. She dismounted before Eli even reached the door. Eli Mercer, she said sharply. Why are there two chimneys smoking at once? You take on farm hands without telling the town council. No farm hands, Eli replied. Ida peered past him, eyes narrowing as she spotted Rachel on the floor, children huddled around her like frightened quail. O Lord above, Ida breathed. Eli, who are these people? Guests. Guests. Ida scoffed. They look like trouble. Eli stepped outside, shutting the door behind him. They're staying here a while. Are you out of your senses? Ida whispered. That woman is wanted. Folks say she stole cattle, abandoned her homestead, ran with strange children. There's a price on her head. And folks say you turn men to stone with one glare, Eli replied, crossing his arms. Ain't sure I believe that either. Ida bristled. This is serious. Sheriff's already hearing talk. The Bennett boy's brother, Zeke Bennett, he's stirring dust in Billings. He's saying that woman belongs to him. Eli's jaw tightened. She don't belong to nobody. Ida leaned in, voice low. Eli, you keep them here. The town will be on your porch with questions. And I ain't sure your answers will save you. Eli held her stare. They stay. Ida shook her head, muttered something about men losing. Since once women crossed their threshold, then rode off fast enough to kick up snow behind her. When Eli stepped inside, Rachel was sitting stiff, eyes wide. She's going to bring trouble, Rachel said. Trouble was already coming, Eli answered. Now we just see it sooner. She looked exhausted, crushed beneath fear that never left. Eli knelt in front of her. You ain't leaving. I have to, Rachel whispered. Before your life gets burned for mine. You're wounded. Kids are half-starved. And a storm's coming tonight. You ain't running anywhere. Rachel's voice broke. I don't know how to accept help, then learn. She stared at him long enough that something old and hardened inside her cracked. One breath, then a nod. By afternoon, the house warmed with life again. James helped Eli chop kindling. Grace organized the others into sweeping, sorting, cleaning. Rachel dozed in the rocking chair near the hearth, the fevered boy coiled in her lap. Eli watched them all quietly. This house had been silent for 2 years. Now it had laughter, movement, footsteps, breathing, life. He didn't know what tomorrow held. Not with Zeke Bennett hunting, not with the sheriff soon to come asking questions, not with a price on Rachel's head. But as the snow built against the windows and Rachel dozed with her children close, Eli felt something he hadn't felt since his wife was alive. Purpose, belonging, a reason to light the fire every morning. And he knew, deep down, bone deep, that whatever storm was coming, he'd face it. For them, for her, for the 7 little souls sleeping in his home like they belonged there all along. The storm rolled in before sundown, thick and merciless, burying Eli's ranch under a wall of white. Wind screamed against the shutters like something alive. The sky had gone the color of pewter, and every instinct Eli possessed, every ranch-born, winter-hardened instinct, told him trouble always traveled with weather like this. He was right. Night fell early. The children huddled near the fire, wrapped in blankets. Grace read to the younger ones from an old book Eli's wife once kept on the windowsill. Her voice was steady, almost gentle, though her eyes flicked toward the door every time the wind changed pitch. Rachel sat in the rocker, pale but upright. Her bandaged arm rested against her ribs. The firelight made her look stronger than she felt, like a woman stubborn enough to hold herself together with the bare hand she had left. Eli set a pot of stew on the table. You should eat, he said. Rachel shook her head. Kids first. You're part of the kids. Her mouth twitched, something nearly like a smile. but she didn't argue. When they finished eating, the younger children dozed. Grace tucked blankets tight around them, glancing at Rachel before speaking. "You want me to watch the door tonight?" Grace asked. Rachel frowned. "No, I can," Grace insisted. "I've been keeping watch for months. I know the signs." Eli crouched beside her. "Young lady," he said gently, "nobody your age ought to be standing guard when the adults are here to do it." Grace straightened. "Mama needs sleep, and you need help." Eli held her gaze, steady but kind. "You help more by resting. You fall asleep on watch, we're in trouble. You stay strong. You help us all tomorrow." Grace hesitated, jaw tightening, then nodded. It was the first time she obeyed an adult without argument. Later, after the children were asleep and Rachel's breathing softened, Eli moved to the porch, lamp in hand. Snow fell so hard it erased the world. Wind tore at his coat. He scanned the dark ridge where his pasture fences ran. Something felt off. Wrong. Movement. A shadow. A rider? He wiped the snow from his eyes and squinted. No, not a rider. 3. They moved slow through the storm, shapes barely visible in the whiteout, heading straight toward the ranch. Eli's blood went cold. He went inside fast, shaking snow from his coat. "Rachel," he said quietly, "wake up." She jolted upright, eyes wild. "Who?" "Riders," Eli whispered. 3 of them, coming down the ridge. Grace sprang up, heart pounding. "Zeke." Rachel's stomach dropped. "It's him," she whispered. "He found us." The fear in her voice sliced something inside Eli clean through. He grabbed his rifle. "Stay behind me. All of you." The pounding on the door came sharp and ugly against the storm. Eli planted himself between the door and the family. Rachel gathered the children behind her, fighting back the shake in her injured arm. The wind howled through the cracks as Eli unlatched the door just enough to speak. "What do you want?" A man's voice answered, smooth, confident, too familiar in tone. "Evening, Mercer. Heard you're harboring a thief." "Zeke Bennett." Eli didn't open the door farther. "No thieves here." Zeke chuckled. "Funny. Folks in Billings say different. Folks in Billings don't know a damn thing about what happened." Zeke's shadow shifted. "Let me see her." No silence. Then the voice turned colder. "You know harboring a fugitive is a hanging offense. You know terrorizing a woman and children is, too." The storm swallowed the seconds that followed. Finally, Zeke spoke again. "Open the door, Mercer, or we break it." Rachel's breath hitched. Grace reached for her mother. The children whimpered. Eli didn't move. "You got 10 seconds, Zeke warned. After that, a gun clicked outside. Rachel gasped. "Eli, don't fight him alone." Eli stood steady, didn't look back. "I ain't fighting him alone." He took one slow breath. Then he threw the door wide. The lantern light spilled onto the porch, illuminating 3 riders. Snow plastered their coats. Guns glinted in their hands. Zeke Bennett sat tall in the saddle, long coat flapping, face half hidden by a scarf, but eyes shining mean as broken glass. "Well, look here," Zeke drawled. Farmer Boy grew a spine. Eli didn't blink. "This ain't your land. That woman is. No woman is property." Zeke's smile showed teeth. "You're gonna die for her. That what you want?" The wind cut between them. Snow hissed across the porch. Behind Eli, Rachel gasped as one of the children whimpered. She covered their ears. Zeke's eyes found her in the doorway. "There she is," he said softly. "Thought you could outrun me, Rachel." Her face drained of color. "Leave us alone," she whispered. Zeke shifted in the saddle. "Come quiet, and I'll spare the rancher." Eli stepped forward. "You step on my land 1 more inch," Eli said quietly, "and you won't leave it standing." The men behind Zeke laughed. Zeke didn't. "You ain't half the man my brother was," Zeke snarled. "But you're stupid enough to die trying to be." He raised his gun. Rachel screamed. Eli didn't flinch. Before Zeke could fire, a voice boomed through the storm. "Put that gun down, Bennett." A shotgun cocked from the darkness. Eli whipped his head toward the sound. Pastor Jedediah Boone emerged through the snow with 10 townsmen behind him. Farmers, ranch hands, the blacksmith, guns drawn, eyes burning with the kind of anger men earned over years of watching injustice fester. Zeke froze. Jedediah stepped forward. You got 30 seconds to ride out before this becomes a burial storm. Zeke's jaw clenched. You siding with that whore? He spat. Jedediah leveled the shotgun. I'm siding with truth. The townsmen raised weapons as one. Zeke's men looked nervous now. Real nervous. Zeke spat in the snow. This ain't over. Is if you ride, Eli said. Zeke's eyes flicked to Rachel. Cold, hungry, hateful. Then he yanked his reins hard. Hiya. Snow exploded as the three riders retreated into the storm. When the wind swallowed their silhouettes, Rachel sank to her knees. Eli caught her before she hit the floor. It's all right, he murmured. They're gone. But Rachel shook her head. No, they'll be back. Zeke, don't quit. He'll burn this place to ash to get to us. Eli tightened his hold. Let him try. Jedediah stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. Eli, he said quietly, we need to talk. Town knows about her. Sheriff's coming tomorrow. Rachel's breath stopped. Eli answered for her. She stays. Long as she needs. Jedediah held his eyes. Then be ready. Tomorrow's going to change everything. And in the warm glow of Eli Mercer's fire, with 7 children trembling under blankets and a wounded mother leaning against his chest, Eli made the silent promise he'd already carved into his bones. Whatever comes, whatever storm rises, he will not let them fall. The storm died sometime near dawn, leaving the world white, heavy, and quiet enough that every sound felt too loud. Eli barely slept. Neither did Rachel. The children lay piled together like a litter of pups, warm but restless, twitching in dreams shaped by too many miles and too much fear. By mid-morning, the snow outside had settled into drifts as high as Eli's waist. Smoke rose from neighboring chimneys across the valley, slow, cautious, watchful. Folks had heard the gunshots last night. Folks always heard. Eli was pouring coffee when a horse trotted up the ridge. Rachel stiffened instantly. Grace grabbed her brother's hand. Eli moved to the window. It's Sheriff Briggs, he said. Alone. Rachel's breath loosened only a little. Alone don't always mean safe. No, but Briggs ain't stupid. He brings a posse when he means trouble. Eli opened the door before the sheriff could knock. Briggs dismounted slowly, stamping snow from his boots. He was a big man, steady as a barn post, with eyes that saw more than most folks wished he would. Mornin', hey. Mornin', Sheriff. Briggs nodded toward the door. May I come in? Eli didn't answer with words. He stepped aside. Inside, Briggs removed his hat, gaze sweeping across the small living room. He took in the blankets, the children watching him with wide, wary eyes, the bandage on Rachel's arm, the exhaustion carved deep into every face. Finally, his eyes landed on Rachel. You the woman been stirring dust across half the county? Rachel swallowed. If you're here to take me, I'm here for the truth, Briggs interrupted. Rachel looked down. Truth don't always matter to men with badges. Maybe not. Briggs set his hat on the table. But it matters to me. He pulled up a chair. Start from the beginning. Rachel hesitated. Eli spoke first. She don't have to tell you a damn thing unless she feels safe. Briggs met his eyes. She is safe. I'm not Zeke Bennett. Rachel's fingers twisted in her skirt. The children pressed closer. Then she began. Quiet first. Halting. But once words started falling, they didn't stop. She told them about her husband's death. About Zeke claiming ownership of her and the children. About the night she refused him, and how he swore no woman would defy a Bennett and live free. She told them about the bounty, the threats, the miles of hiding, the barns, the cellars, the nights so cold she thought the little ones might freeze in her arms. She told them about the last family who tried to help her, and how their wagon was burned to the ground. Briggs listened without interrupting. Not even once. When she finished, silence settled heavy and long. Finally, Briggs blew out a breath. Rachel, you should have come to me. Rachel laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I don't trust men who stand with the law. They always stand with the stronger side. Briggs leaned forward. There's law, and there's justice. Sometimes they match. Sometimes they don't. But I answer to both. He turned to Eli. You really ready to shoulder this fight? Eli didn't hesitate. Been ready. Briggs nodded slowly. All right then. Here's the truth. Zeke Bennett filed a complaint accusing her of kidnapping minors and abandoning her homestead. Judge Hollander rides in tomorrow to hear it. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. No, I can't face him. He'll twist everything. Zeke always does. Briggs held up a hand. Hollander's an honest judge, but he needs to hear you. If you run, Zeke wins by default. Rachel's breathing sped. Eli knelt next to her. You ain't alone anymore. Her eyes glistened. Court's gonna be packed, Briggs warned. Town will be divided. Folks who fear the Bennetts may side with Zeke, but others maybe not. Depends how brave they feel. Brave? Rachel whispered. Brave gets people buried. Eli shook his head. Brave gets people found. Briggs stood, lifting his hat. I'll return at noon tomorrow. I'll escort all of you into town. Safely. Rachel looked up sharply. All of us. Briggs nodded. Judge will want proof. He'll want the children present. Grace clutched her mother's sleeve, eyes wide. Mama, do we have to go? Rachel's voice shook. I don't want them near Zeke. Eli placed a warm hand on her shoulder. I'll be with you the whole way. Grace looked at Eli like he'd just anchored the whole world. Briggs gave one last nod and stepped out into the snow. As soon as the sheriff was gone, Rachel closed her eyes and sank into the chair. I can't do this, she whispered. A courtroom's just another cage. Eli crouched beside her again, taking her trembling hands in his. Rachel, look at me. She did. Slowly. You are the bravest woman I've ever met, Eli said. You walked half this state with 7 young uns under your wings. You fought storms, hunger, men with evil in their hearts. Her breath cracked. Tomorrow ain't about cages. Tomorrow is about truth. What if truth isn't enough? Then I'll stand behind you. Every word. Her eyes shimmered. Why? She whispered. Eli didn't look away. Because some folks are worth standing for. And you're one of them. Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting tears. Grace moved closer, sliding onto the arm of the chair, resting her head against her mother. The younger children came too, bit by bit, curling around Rachel until her lap and arms were full of tiny bodies and trembling hearts. Eli watched the sight quietly. For the first time, Rachel didn't look like a woman running. She looked like a woman gathering strength. Evening settled fast. Snow thinned. Stars began to break through the clouds. Eli stood outside, looking toward town. The valley lay dark and silent, but beneath that silence he felt movement, whispers, gossip, fear, anger. Tomorrow would be a war fought with words instead of bullets. Sometimes that was worse. Rachel joined him at the doorway, a blanket around her shoulders. You think we'll win? She whispered. Eli didn't promise things he couldn't guarantee, but he spoke with his whole chest. I think Zeke Bennett picked the wrong woman to chase. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Eli turned, brushed a snowflake from her hair, then hesitated, just long enough for her to feel the question hanging between them. She didn't answer. She only whispered, Don't leave me tomorrow. I won't, he said, and he meant it with every bone in him. Inside, the children slept. Outside, the valley held its breath. Tomorrow, the whole town would gather. Tomorrow, truth would be weighed. Tomorrow, Rachel would stand, and Eli would not let her fall. The next morning dawned pale and rimmed with ice, the kind of cold that crept into bones whether a person invited it or not. Eli had been awake for hours, stoking the fire, boiling water, helping the little ones button coats and tie boots with fingers still clumsy from sleep. Today was the day. When Rachel finally stepped out of the bedroom, the room fell quiet. She wore the plain calico dress Eli's mother once kept folded in a cedar trunk. Grace had helped her braid her hair. The bandage on her arm peeked from beneath the sleeve, but she looked steady, like someone who had finally stopped running. Still, Eli could see fear moving under her skin like a second heartbeat. You ready? He asked softly. No, Rachel said truthfully. But I'm going anyway. Briggs arrived right on time, his horse coated in frost, his breath steaming in the morning air. He surveyed the children lined up behind Rachel, small hands clutching each other. All right, the sheriff said. Let's ride. Town was already awake when they arrived. People lined porches, stood along fence rails, crowded in twos and threes, whispering behind gloved hands. No one had ever seen a Bennett hauled into court. Not for anything. The Bennetts were the kind of family you didn't cross unless you had a death wish. And Zeke Bennett was the worst of the lot. Eli rode beside the wagon. He kept his jaw tight and his eyes forward, but he felt every stare like a weight pressing on his back. Rachel sat stiff in the wagon seat. Children clustered around her like a shield. Grace pointed to the gathering crowd outside the courthouse. "Mama, they're all staring." "I know, baby," Rachel whispered. "Just hold my hand." Briggs escorted them inside through a side door. The courthouse smelled of wood polish, coal smoke, and nerves. Zeke Bennett was already there. He stood at the front of the room in a pressed coat, his hair greased back, a smirk carved across his face. When he saw Rachel, his expression sharpened like a blade. Well, he drawled. "Look who crawled back." Rachel froze. Eli stepped in front of her, blocking her from Zeke's view. "You don't speak to her," Eli said. "Not today. Not ever." Zeke's smirk widened. "Looks like you pick yourself a guard dog, Rach. Shame he's too blind to see what you are." Briggs stepped between them. "Enough. Bennett, take your seat." Zeke laughed, but did as he was told. The courtroom filled fast. Packed wall to wall. Ranchers, miners, merchants, wives with babies on hips. Some faces friendly, some hostile, most uncertain. Judge Hollander entered, silver hair tied back, eyes sharp as winter birds. "Court is now in session," he said. Zeke's lawyer, a slick man named Dorian Sykes, rose first. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that Rachel Hale abandoned her property, kidnapped minors, and fled lawful arrest. She is unfit, unstable, and dangerous." Rachel flinched, but Eli rested a steady hand on her back. Briggs approached next, serving as both witness and defender. "Judge, what you'll hear today ain't about abandonment. It's about a woman trying to escape a man who used fear like a weapon." Hollander nodded. "Proceed." They called the first witness, Mrs. Clara Marsh, a shopkeeper who once saw Rachel and the children flee through town. "I saw bruises on her," Clara said. "Saw her crying in my store while Zeke shouted outside. No woman runs like that unless she's scared for her life." Sykes dismissed her. "Women bruise easily, and fear is subjective." Next came old Mr. Raleigh, who lived near the Hale homestead. "Zeke went over there more than any brother-in-law should," Raleigh said. "One night, I heard shouting. Rachel ran out with her girl. Zeke followed. Did you intervene?" Sykes asked. "No. Zeke scares me." Sykes smiled like he'd won a point. "Exactly." But then Briggs took the stand, and the room changed. He spoke plainly, no drama, no theatrics. He told the court about the burned wagon, the false witnesses Zeke paid to accuse Rachel, the bounty meant to flush her out. He ended with, "If Rachel Hale had stayed, she'd be dead." A murmur ran through the room. Sykes stepped forward. "Sheriff Briggs, that's speculation." "Call it what you want," Briggs replied. "I call it knowing the man." Then came the moment Eli dreaded. "Rachel Hale," Judge Hollander said, "please take the stand." Rachel walked with the weight of 3 winters on her shoulders. She sat. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice, when it came, was steady. She told everything. Not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly. Every threat, every slap, every time Zeke locked her in a room to teach her obedience. Every mile she walked with 7 children and no safety. Every night she feared she wouldn't wake. When she spoke of the family who tried to help her, the family whose wagon was burned, her voice cracked. "I left because if I stayed, those children would have no mother. And I couldn't let them grow up in fear." Sykes attacked immediately. "You expect us to believe all this with no evidence." Rachel looked him in the eye. "I expect you to believe the truth." He scoffed. "Truth from a woman who's been living under another man's roof while claiming innocence." Eli surged to his feet. "That's enough. Judge Hollander banged his gavel. Mr. Miller, sit down. Eli did, fists shaking. Sykes leaned forward. Is it true you've been staying with Mr. Miller? Yes, Rachel said. Were you sharing a home before he knew your situation? Yes. So you were taking advantage of his charity? No, Rachel's voice tightened. He offered help. Out of the goodness of his heart. Yes. Sykes smirked at the jury. No further questions. Rachel stepped down on unsteady legs. Eli caught her at the bottom of the stairs. You did good, he whispered. No, she whispered back. I'm shaking. That's what strength looks like. When the judge finally called recess, the room erupted in argument. People crowded Rachel, some offering comfort, some sneering. Zeke shoved through the crowd, pointing a finger at her. You think you've won something? He snarled. You're nothing without me. Nothing. Eli stepped in front of him again. She's more without you than you'll ever be. Zeke's lip curled. You want her? She's broken. No, Eli said. She's still standing. Briggs forced Zeke back. The room only calmed once Zeke was seated under guard. During recess, Rachel stepped outside for air. She leaned against the courthouse wall, gulping cold breaths. Eli joined her, coat draped around her shoulders. You all right? No, she whispered. But I'm still here. Eli's eyes softened. That's enough. No, Rachel said, lifting her chin. Tomorrow, it'll be enough. Eli smiled. You're braver than any of us. Rachel didn't deny it this time. She simply whispered, I have to be. For them. The bell rang. Recess ended. Tomorrow would bring the verdict. Tomorrow would decide everything. But tonight, Rachel had already won something Zeke Bennett could never touch. Her voice. Her truth. And a man willing to stand with her no matter the cost. The next morning dawned clear, too clear for the kind of day it was. A cold blue sky stretched over Alder Creek, deceptively calm, as if the world weren't about to decide Rachel Hale's future. Eli saddled the horses while the children ate in nervous silence. Even the youngest sensed something heavy in the air, something final. Grace clung to Rachel's sleeve. Are they going to take you away? Rachel knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. No, baby, she said softly. Not today. She hoped she wasn't lying. Briggs met them at the courthouse steps, hat in hand, eyes tight with worry. Jury came in early, he said. Means they reached a decision fast. Eli exchanged a look with Rachel. That good or bad? He asked. Depends which way the wind was blowing, I suppose, Briggs said. But they didn't take long, I'll tell you that. Rachel swallowed hard. Eli squeezed her hand once before they entered the courtroom. Inside, the gallery was already full. People squeezed shoulder to shoulder, boots scraping, whispers rustling through the room like dry leaves. Zeke Bennett sat at the defendant's table, shackles on his wrists now. Briggs had insisted on that after Zeke tried leaving town the night before. Still, Zeke looked smug, like he knew something no one else did. Rachel kept her eyes away from him. She focused on the children sitting in the first row, knees pressed together, hands folded tight. Grace, Will, Adam, Noah, little Annie, Caleb, and sweet Eli Jr., still thin from the fever, eyes determined and brave for her sake. Eli sat beside Rachel, shoulders straight, jaw locked. The air seemed to hum between them. Steady, solid, unbreakable. Judge Hollander entered. Bring in the jury. 12 men filed in. None looked at Zeke. None looked at Rachel either. Her heart hammered anyway. Gentlemen, the judge said, have you reached a verdict? The foreman, a balding rancher Rachel vaguely recognized, stood with a slip of paper in hand. Yes, Your Honor, we have. The room held its breath. Judge Hollander nodded. Proceed. The foreman's voice rang through the silence. In the case of the Territory versus Zeke Bennett, on the charge of aggravated assault, attempted coercion, and attempted kidnapping, Rachel's lungs burned. We find the defendant. Grace grabbed Eli Jr.'s hand. Guilty on all counts. The room exploded. Shouts, gasps, cries, boots stomping, voices rising like thunder. Rachel's breath left her in a rush. She covered her mouth, choking on relief so strong it hurt. Tears sprang to her eyes without permission. For a moment, she forgot where she was. She forgot about the judge, forgot about the gallery, Forgot about everything except the fact that she was finally free. Eli wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close, steadying her as her body trembled with sobs. Briggs sighed, long and heavy. "Justice," he whispered. "By God, we got justice today." Zeke surged to his feet, face purple with rage. "This ain't legal," he bellowed. "You hear me? I own this town. You own fear." Eli shot back. "That's all." Zeke backward. He fought like a wild animal, kicking, screaming, cursing the whole territory. Rachel didn't flinch this time. Not once. The judge waited for silence. "Zeke Bennett," he said, voice firm, "you are sentenced to 20 years hard labor at the Dakota Territorial Prison. You will be transported under guard within a week." Zeke froze mid-struggle. 20 years. Not days. Not weeks. 20 years of chains and iron bars and no power over her ever again. He stared at Rachel with something she'd never seen before. Not fury. Not control. Not victory. Fear. Real fear. Then he hissed, "I'll remember this." Rachel finally met his gaze. "I won't," she said, and she meant it. People swarmed her outside the courthouse. Some shook her hand. Some apologized. Some cried. Miss Elsie from the bakery wrapped her in a hug. "Lord bless you, Rachel," she whispered. "You should have never had to fight this hard." Old Raleigh tipped his hat. "Glad you're safe now, miss." Real glad. But it was the children who brought her to her knees. They threw their arms around her, every one of them, holding tight, clinging to her like the world had turned right side up for the first time in years. "You're safe, Mama," Grace said through tears. "You're finally safe." Rachel looked at them, all 7, and something inside her settled, like a door finally closing, like a storm finally ending. Eli watched her with an expression she'd come to recognize, part awe, part relief, part something deeper he never named. Briggs stepped forward. "You all right?" Rachel nodded. "Yes, Sheriff. For the first time in a long while." "I am." They rode home that afternoon. The children sang. Eli laughed more than Rachel had ever heard him laugh. Even the horses seemed lighter on their feet. By the time Frostwood Ranch came into view, wide fields, old barns, the cottonwood tree behind the house, the sun was dipping gold over the hills. Home. The word held warmth now. Not dread. Not fear. Warmth. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Rachel stepped onto the porch and found Eli waiting, coffee in hand. "You did it today," he said softly. "You stood taller than any person I've met." Rachel shook her head. "I didn't do it alone." "No," Eli agreed. "But you're the one who kept going when everything said quit." She turned to him, really turned. The man who gave her shelter, gave her safety, gave her a chance to breathe again. "Eli," she whispered. He stepped closer. "You don't owe me a thing, Rachel." "I know," she said, "but I want to give you something anyway." His brows lifted. "What's that?" She took his hand. Her voice trembled, but her heart didn't. "A future, if you want it." Eli's